Black girl mocked for bread and water lunch. Until a billionaire sat beside her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into our story. It was a cold, blustery afternoon in downtown New York City, and the air felt thick with the chill of the approaching winter. In the bustling corner of a busy cafe, a little girl sat alone at a small table by the window. Her name was Maya. She was small for her age, her clothes worn and patched up in places where the fabric had begun to fray. The brown paper bag she carried with her was crumpled, the corners bent from the long walk she had taken from her shelter on the other side of town. She set the bag on the table, taking out a small piece of bread and a plastic bottle of water. Her lunch was nothing more than that, just bread and water, a stark contrast to the gourmet meals being served to the other patrons around her. A group of teenagers at a nearby table laughed loudly, glancing at her, and a few of them made snide remarks. "Look at her," one of the girls sneered. "Bread and water, huh? What? No five-star meal today." The others snickered, their voices dripping with mockery. Maya didn't respond. She simply took a bite of her bread, her eyes cast downward, focused on the simple meal in front of her. She had learned a long time ago that silence was safer than responding. She didn't want to make it worse. But she also didn't want to cry. Not in front of them. Not in front of anyone. And then, the unexpected happened. The door to the cafe opened with a soft chime, and a man stepped in. He was tall, wearing an expensive black coat, and a pair of polished leather shoes that clicked softly on the floor as he walked. His presence was commanding, but there was a sadness in his eyes that seemed distant, as though carrying the weight of too many untold stories. He glanced around the cafe, and for a moment, his gaze caught on Maya. The laughter around her seemed to fade away as he made his way to the counter. He ordered a coffee, his voice soft and measured, but his eyes kept darting back to Maya. As he waited for his drink, he noticed the kids at the table. They were still laughing, but their laughter had taken on a sharper edge now. They were making fun of her lunch. "I don't know how she can eat that," one of the boys said, loud enough for Maya to hear. Maya's hands gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. She didn't want to let them see how much their words hurt. She just wanted to finish her lunch and go. But before she could take another bite, the man stepped toward her. He stopped a few feet away, his voice gentle, almost like he was afraid to disturb her. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his words cutting through the tension in the air. Maya looked up at him, surprised. She hadn't expected anyone to speak to her, especially not a stranger. The man smiled warmly, his eyes kind. Something about his presence made her feel a little less alone. She nodded shyly, and he took a seat across from her, his coffee resting in front of him. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat quietly, allowing the noise of the cafe to swirl around them. Finally, he broke the silence. "I couldn't help but notice," he said, his voice still soft, "that you've got the most interesting lunch here. Bread and water, huh? A very simple meal." Maya looked up at him, still not sure if she should speak. But something about him made her feel like it was okay to respond. "It's all I have," she said quietly. "I don't mind." The man's face softened. He looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to read the story behind her eyes. "Sometimes, the simplest meals are the best," he said, his tone thoughtful. "But I think you deserve more than just bread and water." The words caught her off guard. She had never heard someone say something like that to her. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the man looked at the waiter and gestured toward the counter. "I'll pay for her lunch," he said simply, the kindness in his voice undeniable. The waiter blinked, clearly surprised, but nodded. As the man turned back to Maya, he smiled again. "I don't think anyone should go hungry, especially not a young girl like you. If you want, I could buy you something a little better than bread and water." Maya looked down at her lunch, still in shock. No one had ever done something like this for her. But just as quickly, the doubt crept in. She had learned not to accept charity, not to accept anything that came with pity. "It's okay," she said, shaking her head. "I'm used to it." The man's eyes softened even more. "You shouldn't have to get used to it," he said gently. "No one should ever have to get used to being treated this way." Maya's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in a long time, She felt like someone truly understood. She couldn't help but smile, just a little. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. "I'll tell you what," he said. "How about we share this meal together? I'll get you something good to eat, and we can just talk." Maya didn't know what to say. She had never been offered kindness in such an unexpected way before. But something inside her told her this was different. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something new. And as the man stood up to order, she felt a spark of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. A hope that maybe life wasn't as lonely as it had seemed before. The man returned a few minutes later with a tray, steaming food piled high. A warm, freshly baked sandwich, a side of soup, and a cold drink. He set it down in front of Maya with a gentle smile. "Here you go. Something better than just bread and water, right?" Maya blinked, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had never expected anything like this. No one had ever done something this kind for her. Not a stranger, not anyone. She stared at the food, her stomach grumbling in response, but a part of her still hesitated. She had learned to be cautious of generosity, especially when it came from people she didn't know. She hadn't been raised to rely on anyone but herself. "Thank you," she said softly, not quite sure what else to say. The man nodded, pulling his chair closer to her. He took a sip from his own drink before speaking again. "You don't have to thank me. No one should ever go hungry, especially not someone as young as you." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She didn't know what it was about this man. There was something different about him. He wasn't like the others, the ones who passed by her every day, pretending she wasn't there, pretending she didn't exist. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maya hesitated before replying. "Maya." "Nice to meet you, Maya," he said, his smile widening. "I'm Jonathan." He took another sip from his cup. "I've seen people like you before. People who don't have much, but still make do. You're stronger than you think." Maya didn't respond. She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to being told she was strong. She wasn't used to being told anything at all, really. Most people just ignored her, or worse, mocked her. But Jonathan's words were different. They felt real. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she mattered, like someone cared. As they sat there in silence, the hum of the cafe filling the space between them, Maya started to eat. It wasn't until she took the first bite that she realized how hungry she truly was. The warmth of the soup and the softness of the sandwich comforted her in a way she hadn't known in years. She didn't care about the laughter she had endured earlier. She didn't care about the cruel remarks. This moment, this meal, was hers. And for once, she allowed herself to enjoy it. Jonathan watched her eat, a quiet smile on his face as he took in the scene. Maya, a young girl who had nothing, sitting across from him, eating the food he had bought for her. It was a simple thing, but it felt like so much more. Maya had never been given this kind of attention before, not in the way that Jonathan gave it. He wasn't pitying her. He wasn't trying to show off his wealth. He was just present. And for some reason, that was enough. As they ate, Maya felt the tension in her shoulders begin to melt away. She didn't have to worry about the stares, the judgment, or the cruelty of others. She could just focus on the food in front of her and the quiet companionship of this stranger who, for reasons she couldn't fully understand, wanted to share this moment with her. When they finished eating, Jonathan pushed his plate aside and leaned back in his chair. He looked at Maya, his expression thoughtful. "I want to help you, Maya," he said, his voice steady. "I know you probably don't trust people like me, and I get that. But I want to do something for you. Something more than just buying you lunch." Maya looked up at him, unsure of how to react. She had heard these kinds of promises before. People who said they wanted to help, but never followed through. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. Jonathan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "I want to make sure you have what you need. I know you're struggling. I've seen it. And I want to help you get back on your feet. Maybe get you into a better place, with better opportunities." Maya felt her heart race. "I don't want charity," she said quickly. "I don't need anyone's pity." Jonathan shook his head. "This isn't charity. This is just giving you a chance. You don't deserve to go through life feeling like you don't matter. You're worth more than that." Maya swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She wasn't sure if she believed him, but for the first time in a long time, a small part of her wanted to. She had always been taught that people didn't do things for free. There was always a catch, always a hidden motive. But Jonathan's words felt genuine, like he wasn't trying to manipulate her or take advantage of her. He just wanted to help. I don't know, Maya said, her voice soft. It's hard to believe someone would do that. Jonathan smiled gently. I understand. But I'm not going anywhere, Maya. I'm here, and I'm not going to let you slip through the cracks. Maya met his gaze, feeling a mix of emotions swirl inside her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that there was still good in the world, that people like Jonathan existed. And maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something different. She took a deep breath and nodded, a small, hopeful smile crossing her face. Okay, she whispered. I'll trust you. Jonathan's smile widened. Good, he said, standing up and offering her his hand. Then let's start by making sure you never have to eat bread and water again. The next few days passed slowly for Maya, each one a blur of emotions. She had gone from eating bread and water in a corner of the cafe to having full meals and sitting across from Jonathan, the man who had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. She couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief that hung over her, but as the days went by, she found herself growing more comfortable with the thought of him helping her. Still, a part of her held back. She had been let down before, and trusting people wasn't something she could do easily. Jonathan had been kind, but she couldn't help but wonder if he would really stick around or if this was just a passing gesture. One afternoon, Jonathan asked if she wanted to go for a walk. She hesitated, then nodded. Maybe it was time to let herself believe that things could be different. He took her to a park near the edge of the city, where the trees were beginning to show signs of the changing season. The air was crisp, and the sound of distant laughter from children playing filled the space around them. How are you feeling, Maya? Jonathan asked as they walked side by side, his hands shoved into his coat pockets. Maya glanced up at him, unsure how to answer. I don't know, she said, her voice quiet. It's just hard to believe someone would really want to help me. I've never had anyone do that before. Jonathan smiled softly, his eyes warm. I understand. It's not easy to trust people, especially when life has been difficult. But I'm not going anywhere, Maya. You can believe that. She felt a flicker of something inside her, a tiny spark of hope. She hadn't felt that in so long. She didn't want to get her hopes up, but Jonathan's words made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he was different from the others. I don't want to disappoint you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You won't, Jonathan assured her, his voice steady. You're not disappointing me by needing help. You're not weak for asking. It takes strength to accept help, Maya. I want to see you succeed, and I'm here to support you however I can. Maya swallowed, trying to process his words. They felt genuine, but the doubts still lingered in her mind. They reached a bench near the center of the park, and Jonathan gestured for her to sit. She hesitated for a moment before sitting down, and he took the seat beside her. The wind rustled the leaves of the trees, and for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of nature around them. Maya looked up at the sky, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. What's your story, Jonathan? She asked suddenly, her curiosity taking over. He turned to her, a faint smile on his face. My story, he repeated. I guess I don't talk about it much. I'm just a guy who's been lucky enough to have a good life, but I've had my own struggles too. I lost my family when I was young, and I've spent most of my life building my career and trying to fill the emptiness that was left behind. But something's been missing. I didn't realize it until I saw you, Maya. Maya looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you mean? I mean that for all the things I've achieved, I've been missing something real. Something that matters more than money or status. Helping people, seeing someone's life change for the better, that's what I want to do. That's what feels like it's really worth something. Maya was quiet for a moment, letting his words sink in. She didn't know what to say. Jonathan's words felt like a lifeline, but it was still so hard to believe. Could she really trust him? Could she really believe that someone like him, who had everything, would care about her? I've never really had anyone believe in me before, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know how to believe in myself. Jonathan turned to her, his eyes full of empathy. I believe in you, Maya, and I think you can believe in yourself too. But it's okay if it takes time. I'm not rushing you. I'm just here for you. Whenever you're ready. A wave of emotion washed over Maya, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She felt like there was someone who genuinely cared, someone who wanted the best for her. She took a deep breath, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know how much this means to me. Jonathan reached out and placed a hand on hers, a gesture of reassurance. "You're welcome, Maya. You're worth it. I'm glad we met." As they sat there together, the quiet of the park around them, Maya felt something shift inside her. Maybe it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could believe in herself, in people, and in the possibility of a future where she wasn't just surviving but thriving. Jonathan had given her something more than food or shelter. He had given her a glimpse of hope. And for the first time in a long time, Maya allowed herself to feel that hope fully, knowing that with time, maybe, just maybe, she could make it real. The days that followed seemed to stretch on for Maya, each one filled with a mix of anticipation and disbelief. She had never experienced anything quite like this before, being cared for, being seen. Jonathan continued to visit, always with a gentle smile, always checking in to make sure she was all right. But every time she saw him, there was a small, persistent voice in her head reminding her that kindness could be fleeting. She had been let down so many times before. Still, there was something about Jonathan that made her want to believe. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, Jonathan called Maya and asked her to meet him at the park near the cafe. It had been a long day, and she was tired, but something in his voice made her agree. She met him near the swings, where they had shared their first meaningful conversation. "I'm glad you could make it," Jonathan said, his eyes lighting up as he saw her approaching. Maya offered him a small smile. She still wasn't sure what she was supposed to feel, but she knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, she was actually looking forward to something. "Of course," she said, softly. "You wanted to talk?" Jonathan nodded and gestured for her to sit down on the bench beside him. "Yes, but also, I wanted to show you something." He pulled out a small envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to her. Maya looked at him, confused, but took the envelope from his hands. It was simple, unmarked, with no return address. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled out a piece of paper. As she read, her breath caught in her throat. "This is for you," Jonathan said quietly, watching her closely. The letter inside the envelope was from a school in the city, offering her a scholarship for her education. It was a full scholarship covering tuition, books, and even transportation. Maya's hands shook as she read through the letter again, her heart racing in her chest. She had always dreamed of going to school, of learning more than what was offered to her in the streets and shelters she had called home. But she had never thought it would actually happen. This is real?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan smiled. "It's real. You've got a chance, Maya. I want to help you take it." Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. "But why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this for me?" Jonathan's expression softened. "Because you deserve it, Maya. You've always deserved better than what you've been given. I'm just giving you the opportunity to prove it to yourself." For a long moment, Maya sat in stunned silence, the letter still clutched in her hands. She had always thought that opportunities like this were for other people, the rich, the lucky, the ones who didn't have to struggle for every meal. She never thought she would be one of them. And yet here she was, holding a letter that could change everything. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice kind but firm. "You don't have to say anything right now, Maya. I just want you to know that you have a choice. You don't have to live your life in survival mode anymore. You can do something with it, something that matters." The words hit her like a wave. She had always thought her life was determined by the hand she had been dealt, by the circumstances of her birth, by the struggles that had shaped her existence. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't true. Maybe she could choose a different path. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted quietly, her voice shaky. "But I want to try. I want to see if I can make something of this." Jonathan smiled, his eyes warm. "I'll be here every step of the way. You're not alone, Maya." The moment hung in the air between them, the promise of something more than just survival, of a chance at a real life, a better life. Maya couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope in her chest. It was small, fragile, but it was there. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in a soft golden glow, Maya felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be different. She could be different. For the first time, she believed it. She had a choice, and this was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Maya's life began to shift in ways she never imagined. The scholarship Jonathan had arranged for her opened doors to a world she had always seen from the outside. She was enrolled at a private school in the city, a place where the children wore uniforms with polished shoes, where the hallways were lined with trophies and awards. Everything was so different from the cramped shelters she had grown up in, from the streets where she had learned to fend for herself. At first, the transition was overwhelming. The other kids seemed so polished, so confident. They had everything she had never known. Families that took care of them, homes filled with warmth, futures that seemed certain. And there was Maya, sitting in the back of the classroom, unsure of how to fit in. She had always been quiet, but now she felt even smaller, like she didn't belong. Every morning, she would walk into school with a mixture of dread and hope. She felt the weight of everyone's gaze on her, the whispers behind her back. The other students didn't understand her. They didn't understand how it felt to walk the streets alone, how it felt to never know where your next meal was coming from, how it felt to be invisible. But Jonathan, he always saw her. He made sure she knew that. Every day after school, he would check in on her, making sure she was adjusting, asking if she needed anything. He even arranged for a tutor to help her with her studies. "You're doing great, Maya," he told her one afternoon after a tutoring session. "I know this is a big change, but you're handling it better than you think." His words meant more to her than she let on. She was still terrified. Terrified of failing. Terrified of the other kids laughing at her. But his belief in her gave her something to hold on to. Slowly, Maya started to find her place. She joined a small group of students who, like her, didn't quite fit in with the rest of the crowd. They weren't the popular kids, but they weren't the outcasts either. They were just themselves. And that was enough. One of the girls in the group, Sarah, noticed Maya's quiet strength and started talking to her after class. "You're different," Sarah said one afternoon as they sat together in the library, books spread out in front of them. "I like that. You don't try to pretend to be something you're not." Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thanks," she said softly. "I've never really had to pretend." "You don't need to hear," Sarah said. "You belong just as much as anyone else." Those words stayed with Maya long after the conversation ended. For the first time, someone saw her, really saw her, and didn't make her feel like an outsider. It was a small thing, but to Maya, it meant the world. As the weeks passed, Maya's confidence began to grow. She still had her doubts, still had moments when the fear and insecurity crept in, but with Jonathan's support and Sarah's friendship, she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a future. One evening, Jonathan invited Maya to his home for dinner. She had been to his office a few times, but she had never been to his house. When she arrived, she was taken aback by the grandeur of it all. The house was massive, with high ceilings, marble floors, and a huge dining table that could seat a dozen people. It felt like something out of a movie. "This is incredible," Maya whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the surroundings. Jonathan smiled, leading her to the dining room. "It's just a house, Maya. It doesn't mean anything without the people inside." They sat down for dinner, and as they ate, Jonathan talked about his life, his work, his family, his experiences growing up. "I didn't always have it easy," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But I worked hard to get here. And now I want to help people who need a chance." Maya listened, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had always been taught that people like Jonathan, people with money, power, and success, were untouchable. But here he was, sitting across from her, treating her like she mattered. "You've already helped me more than I can explain," Maya said quietly. Jonathan smiled warmly. "I'm glad, Maya. But you're the one doing the hard work. You're the one taking the chance." Maya looked down at her plate, the words sinking in. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like it could be something good. As the evening wore on, Jonathan shared stories of his own struggles, how he had worked tirelessly to build his business and make a difference. Maya realized that, despite their differences in background and upbringing, they both shared the same drive, the desire to create something better for themselves and for others. "I think you're going to do great things, Maya," Jonathan said, his voice filled with genuine belief. "You've got a fire inside you. Don't let anyone dim it." Maya smiled, feeling a sense of warmth flood through her. It was a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. It was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could change her life. Hope that with Jonathan's help, she could create the future she had always dreamed of. And as the evening ended, Maya realized something important. This wasn't just about a scholarship or a nice dinner. It was about the belief that someone had in her. And that belief was something she could hold on to as she moved forward. She wasn't alone anymore. Over the next few months, Maya found herself settling into a routine. School was still a challenge, but with Jonathan's support and the tutor he had arranged for her, she was slowly catching up. She worked hard, sometimes staying up late into the night to finish her assignments, but the effort was starting to pay off. Her grades improved, and her confidence grew. Bit by bit, she was no longer the quiet girl who sat in the back of the class, hoping to go unnoticed. Now, she was raising her hand, asking questions, engaging in discussions. But even with all the progress she was making, there was a lingering fear inside her. The fear that this could all be too good to be true. That one day, Jonathan might grow tired of helping her. That one day, he might decide she wasn't worth the effort. It was a fear that crept into her mind late at night when she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. But every time she thought about it, she reminded herself of the promise Jonathan had made to her. He wasn't going anywhere. He believed in her, and that belief was starting to make a difference. One afternoon, after a long day of classes, Maya met Jonathan at the park. It had become their place, the spot where they could talk about anything and everything without judgment. Jonathan was waiting for her by the swings, his usual warm smile on his face. "How was school today?" he asked, his voice light. Maya smiled back, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "It was okay," she said, but her voice didn't carry the usual enthusiasm. Jonathan noticed the change. "What's wrong, Maya?" he asked, his tone soft but concerned. She hesitated, looking down at the ground. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this. The school, I mean. Everyone there is so different. I don't feel like I belong." Jonathan stepped closer, his expression serious. "I get it," he said. "You're in a new environment, and it's tough. But that doesn't mean you don't belong. You've got just as much right to be there as anyone else. And you're doing great. I can see it." Maya shook her head. "I don't know if I'm smart enough, or if I can keep up. What if I fail?" Jonathan gently placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady. "Maya, failing doesn't mean you're not smart enough. It just means you're learning. And as long as you keep trying, that's what matters. You've already come so far." Maya looked up at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I guess," she said, her voice still unsure. "But I don't know if I can do it on my own." Jonathan smiled, his eyes warm. "You're not alone, Maya. I'm here. And you've got a whole team behind you now, your teachers, your friends, and me. We believe in you." The words were simple, but they meant more to her than she realized. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was building something. A future. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be days when she doubted herself, but she knew now that she had the strength to keep going. "Thanks," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not used to people believing in me." Jonathan's smile softened. "It's about time you did." Over the next few weeks, Maya threw herself into her studies even more. She was determined to prove to herself that she could do it. She stayed late after class, worked with her tutor, and asked questions whenever she needed help. Slowly but surely, she started to catch up with the other students. Her grades improved even more, and she began to feel a sense of accomplishment that she had never known before. But the road wasn't without its bumps. There were still moments when she felt out of place, when she saw the other kids laughing with their friends and felt like she was on the outside looking in. She still had moments when the fear of failure crept in, when she wondered if she was just fooling herself. But each time, she remembered Jonathan's words, and she pushed through. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a future, and she was going to fight for it. One afternoon, after a particularly tough exam, Maya met Jonathan at the cafe, as they often did. She was tired, her mind still buzzing from the test, but she knew that talking to him always helped clear her head. As she walked in, she spotted Jonathan at their usual table, waiting for her. She smiled as she approached, but he could see the weariness in her eyes. "Tough day?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Maya nodded, sinking into the chair across from him. "Yeah, the exam was harder than I thought." Jonathan chuckled softly. "I think you'll be surprised. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for." She smiled faintly, but didn't say anything. Jonathan leaned forward, his expression serious. "Maya, I know it's tough. I know it feels like you're fighting against the world sometimes, but I want you to remember something." Maya looked at him, her eyes curious. "What?" "You don't have to fight alone anymore," he said. You've got a team now, and we're all rooting for you. So, when things get hard, don't forget that. Maya took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time, she realized just how far she had come. She wasn't the same girl who had first sat down in that cafe, eating bread and water. She was stronger now, and she had people who cared about her. She wasn't alone, and for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Months passed, and with each day that Maya walked through the halls of her new school, something inside her grew stronger. She had been doing well academically, pushing through the tough subjects with Jonathan's support and the help of her new friends. But just as the path seemed to level out, a new challenge emerged, something Maya had not expected. The school had begun to plan for the annual talent show, an event that showcased the students' skills and creativity. Posters were put up all around the school, encouraging students to participate. Maya had always been shy, never one to stand in the spotlight. But something about the idea of standing in front of everyone, showing who she was, caught her attention. She wasn't sure why, but the thought of sharing something personal, of being seen for who she truly was, seemed like something she needed to do. It was terrifying, but maybe it was time to stop hiding. One afternoon after school, Maya sat in the library, flipping through a book she had borrowed. She had been thinking about the talent show for weeks, unsure if she had the courage to sign up. But as she stared at the book in her hands, a thought crossed her mind. What if this was her chance to show everyone what she could do? What if she could prove to herself that she wasn't just the girl from the streets, that she wasn't just the quiet girl in the back of the classroom? Her mind raced. Her heart beat faster as the thought took hold. She wasn't sure what talent she had to show, but she knew one thing. She was ready to try. The next day, Maya found herself standing in front of the sign-up sheet for the talent show. Her hands shook as she picked up the pen, but with a deep breath, she wrote her name down. She wasn't sure what she was going to do yet, but she had made the first step. As the days passed, she started to practice. She didn't know exactly what kind of performance she would give, but she had always enjoyed drawing and painting. Maybe, just maybe, she could create something meaningful that would tell her story. She stayed late in the art room, working on her sketches, pouring her heart into each stroke of the pencil. It was hard, more difficult than anything she had ever done before, but it was also freeing. For the first time, she was expressing herself in a way that wasn't about survival or getting by. It was about something deeper, something personal. As she worked on her art, Jonathan would visit her, offering words of encouragement. He could see the transformation in her, how she was beginning to believe in herself in ways she never had before. "You're doing great, Maya," he would say. "Just keep pushing. You've got this." Every time he spoke to her, she felt a little more confident, a little more sure of herself. The night of the talent show arrived, and Maya stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been so nervous in her life. The other students were buzzing with excitement, rehearsing their performances, but Maya could barely bring herself to breathe. Her art was set up on an easel beside her, ready to be revealed to the audience. She was going to do something simple, just stand there and show her work. It wasn't a big performance, but to her, it felt like the biggest thing she had ever done. As the show began, Maya watched from the wings as the other students performed. Some sang, some danced, and some did magic tricks. Each act was more polished than the last, and Maya began to wonder if she was out of her league. But then, it was her turn. Her name was called, and with a deep breath, she walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding, the crowd a sea of faces she didn't recognize, and for a moment, she froze. But then she remembered Jonathan's words, "You've got this." She took a step forward, her hands trembling as she stood beside her artwork. The crowd waited, and Maya felt the silence stretch around her. She wanted to say something, to explain her art, but the words stuck in her throat. So, she didn't speak. Instead, she turned to the easel and began to slowly lift the sheet covering her painting. As the painting was revealed, there was a collective gasp from the audience. It was a portrait of a little girl sitting on a park bench, holding a single flower, looking out at the world with a sense of wonder. The background was filled with dark colors, but the girl's face was painted in soft tones, her expression one of quiet strength. Maya had poured everything into this piece. It was her. It was the story of the girl she had been, silent, unnoticed, but still full of hope. And as she looked at the painting, she realized something. She wasn't just showing this to the audience. She was showing it to herself. She wasn't just the girl from the streets anymore. She was someone with a story, someone with a future. When the painting was fully revealed, Maya took a step back, letting the crowd take it in. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. And then, slowly, the applause began. It started with a few claps, hesitant at first, but soon the entire audience was clapping, some standing up to cheer. Maya's heart swelled with emotion, and tears welled in her eyes. She had done it. She had stood up there and shown who she was. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged. After the show, Jonathan found her backstage, his face lit with pride. "You were incredible," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I knew you could do it." Maya smiled through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jonathan squeezed her gently. "You did all the work. You're the one who believed in yourself." And for the first time, Maya did. She realized then that this wasn't just a victory for her. It was the first of many. She was no longer the quiet girl on the sidelines. She was someone who could stand up and show the world who she really was. After the talent show, Maya felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had stood in front of the entire school, shown her work, and received praise from people who had once seemed so far removed from her world. But even as she basked in the warmth of the applause and the support she received, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had started to believe in herself, but there was still a gap between who she was and who she wanted to become. One afternoon, Jonathan asked Maya to meet him at the park again. It was a quiet, overcast day, and there was a slight chill in the air as she walked toward the bench where they often met. She had grown used to these little meetings. They were a chance for her to talk about her day, to share her thoughts, or sometimes just sit quietly and think. But today, as she approached, Jonathan looked more serious than usual, his hands tucked into his pockets as he waited for her. "Hey," Maya said, offering him a small smile as she sat down beside him. Jonathan smiled back, but there was something in his eyes that told her this conversation would be different from the others. "Hey Maya, how's everything going? How's school?" he asked. Maya nodded, but she could tell that he was looking for more than just the usual response. "It's going well," she said after a moment. "I'm still adjusting, but I think I'm getting the hang of things." Jonathan paused, his eyes scanning the sky before he turned to face her. "Maya, I've been thinking about something. You've come so far, and I'm proud of you. But I also know there's something else you've been wanting. Something more than just fitting in at school, right?" Maya blinked, caught off guard by his directness. She had always kept her dreams to herself, afraid of putting them out there only to be disappointed. But Jonathan's words made her feel like maybe she could share her thoughts. She swallowed, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jonathan took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "I mean, I know you've been working hard, and I can see you starting to believe in yourself. But I also know you're not just here to survive. You want more than that. You want to make something of yourself. I can see it in the way you're starting to think bigger." Maya's mind raced. She had always dreamed of something more, of escaping the cycle of poverty, of making something of herself that wasn't just about getting by. But the fear of failing had always kept her from reaching for those dreams. "I don't know if I can do that," she whispered, looking down at her hands. "I don't know if I have what it takes." Jonathan's voice softened, his tone full of understanding. "You do, Maya. You've already got everything you need inside of you. You just have to trust that you can make it happen. And I want to help you with that." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard someone speak to her like that before. It wasn't just about the scholarship or the art she had created for the talent show. It was about her future, her dreams, her potential. She felt the weight of it all, the hope that was beginning to blossom inside her, and the fear that she might not be able to live up to it. "I want to make something of myself," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "But I'm scared. What if I fail?" Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression calm and reassuring. "Maya, everyone feels that way. The fear of failure doesn't go away just because you've come this far. What matters is that you keep going, even when it feels impossible. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. But if you keep believing in yourself and take it one step at a time, you'll get there." Maya nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She had spent so much of her life just trying to survive, just trying to get by. But now, Jonathan was giving her the chance to do more than that. He was giving her the chance to build something something bigger than she had ever dared to imagine. She looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me." Jonathan smiled, his eyes kind. "You're welcome. But this is just the beginning. You've got a long road ahead of you, but I know you can do it." As Maya sat beside him, listening to the soft rustling of the leaves in the trees, she realized something important. She wasn't just in this for herself anymore. She had the chance to build a future, not just for her, but for others like her. She had the power to change her life, and maybe, just maybe, she could help others along the way. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like it was possible. And as the clouds parted and the sun peeked through, Maya smiled to herself. She wasn't afraid anymore. The future was hers to create. As the weeks went by, Maya found herself becoming more comfortable in her new life. The fear that had once paralyzed her was slowly giving way to confidence. She was working hard at school, her grades improving steadily. With Jonathan's support, she felt like she was finally getting a glimpse of the future she had always dreamed of, a future that was no longer defined by poverty and fear. But despite her progress, there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty deep inside her. She knew she wasn't done yet, that there was more to be done, more to be learned, and more obstacles to face. One afternoon, Jonathan took Maya to a local art gallery for a special exhibition. The walls were adorned with beautiful paintings, sculptures, and photographs, each piece telling a unique story. Maya had always loved art, but seeing these works in person, in a space filled with people who appreciated and admired them, felt different. It felt like a dream, like something she could never attain. As they walked through the gallery, Jonathan could sense her awe and hesitation. "Do you want to create art like this?" he asked gently, observing her silence. Maya hesitated. "I don't know if I'm good enough for that," she said, her voice quiet. "These pieces, they're amazing, but I don't think I could ever make something like that." Jonathan smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You already have, Maya. That painting you did for the talent show. Do you remember how it made everyone feel? It wasn't just about the technical skill. It was about the emotion behind it, the story you were telling." Maya thought about it. She had never really thought of her art as something worthy of being displayed in a gallery like this. But Jonathan's words stuck with her. Maybe it wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was about showing who she really was, expressing herself in a way that mattered. As the day went on, Jonathan asked Maya about her dreams, what she wanted to do with her art, where she saw herself in the future. "I don't know," Maya said, looking around at the artworks on display. "I guess I want to make people feel something with my art. I want it to matter, not just to me, but to others, too." Jonathan nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I think you're already doing that," he said. "But if you want to take it further, you'll need to keep challenging yourself, stepping outside your comfort zone. You've got the talent, Maya. You just need to keep believing in it." That night, Maya sat in her room, thinking about the gallery, about her conversation with Jonathan. She realized that, for the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand what it meant to have a vision, to see beyond the limitations that had always held her back. She had spent so many years focused on just getting by, on surviving, that she had never truly let herself dream. But now, she felt something shift inside her. She wanted to do more. She wanted to be more. She wanted her art to speak, to inspire, to change the way people saw the world. The next day at school, Maya stood in front of her art class, a canvas stretched before her. She had spent hours the night before, working on a new piece, pouring every ounce of emotion she could into it. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't like the polished works in the gallery, but it was hers. It was raw, real, and full of the hope she had been learning to embrace. As she worked, the other students began to notice. At first, there were only a few whispers, but soon, a few of them came up to her, asking questions about her process. Maya felt a rush of pride, but also a bit of anxiety. She wasn't used to attention, especially for something she had created. But as they admired her work, she realized that this was what she had wanted all along, to be seen, to be appreciated for who she was and what she could create. Later that week, Maya decided to submit her painting to a local art competition. It wasn't something she had ever considered before, but something about the idea of having her work seen by a larger audience made her feel both nervous and excited. She sent in the application, not expecting to win, but just wanting to take that next step. When the results came in, she was shocked to see that her painting had been selected for the exhibition. She couldn't believe it. For a girl who had once been invisible, who had spent years just trying to survive, this was more than a victory. It was a sign that her dreams were within reach. When she told Jonathan the news, his face lit up with pride. "I knew you could do it, Maya," he said, his voice full of warmth. "This is just the beginning for you." As the exhibition date approached, Maya couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. She had always been an outsider, and the thought of her art being displayed in such a prestigious space made her both nervous and proud. But the closer it came, the more she realized that this wasn't just about the art. It was about her journey, about everything she had overcome to get here. On the night of the exhibition, Maya walked into the gallery, her heart racing. She had never been in a place like this before, surrounded by people who appreciated art, who saw its value. And then, she saw her painting, hanging proudly on the wall, surrounded by other works of art. It was a surreal moment, one she would never forget. As she stood there, staring at her work, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. She had done it. She had taken the risk, stepped out of her comfort zone, and created something that spoke to others. And in that moment, she realized that her journey had only just begun. This was her first step toward a future she had once thought impossible. And with Jonathan's support and her own determination, she knew she could achieve whatever she set her mind to. The day after the exhibition, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the letter that had arrived earlier that morning. It was from the same local art competition where her painting had been featured, and the words printed on the page left her breathless. Her painting had won first place. She couldn't believe it. The small gallery, the people who had seen her work, the strangers who had stood before her painting, Maya had won. It wasn't just a small victory anymore. It felt like the world had shifted in her favor. She held the letter tightly in her hands, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. The girl who had once lived on the streets, the girl who had fought for every scrap of food and every chance to be seen, had just achieved something she had never imagined. She had done it. Her dream was beginning to take shape. Later that day, she met Jonathan at their usual park, the place where they had first talked about her future. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the benches and trees, and Maya felt her heart racing as she approached him. He was waiting by the swing set, a calm expression on his face, but Maya could see the anticipation in his eyes. "Hey," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Jonathan looked up and smiled. "Hey, Maya, how was the exhibition?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she held out the letter, watching as Jonathan's eyes scanned it. As he read, his smile grew wider, his eyes shining with pride. "Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is incredible. You did it." Maya swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe it. I really can't. It doesn't feel real." Jonathan stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's real. You earned it, Maya. You've worked so hard, and now it's paying off." A flood of emotions overwhelmed her: relief, gratitude, and something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The future, which once seemed so distant and uncertain, now felt like something she could reach out and touch. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her eyes filling with tears. Jonathan smiled warmly, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just here to help you see what you're capable of. This is your success, Maya. You've earned every bit of it." They stood there for a few moments, the weight of the moment sinking in. Maya had come so far. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into that cafe months ago, unsure of herself and afraid of being judged. She had taken risks, worked tirelessly, and now she was being recognized for her talent. She had found a sense of purpose, and she wasn't going to stop now. "What comes next?" Maya asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Jonathan thought for a moment before answering. "You keep going. You keep creating, keep pushing yourself. You've proven that you have the talent. Now it's about what you do with it." Maya nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. She wasn't finished yet. This was just the beginning. The next few weeks passed in a blur of excitement. Maya's painting was showcased at a larger exhibition, and she was invited to speak about her journey as part of a panel discussion for up-and-coming artists. For the first time, she was being recognized as a true artist, and the sense of accomplishment she felt was overwhelming. But despite the recognition, Maya remained humble. She had always known that her success wasn't just about the awards or the attention. It was about the way she had grown, the way she had started to believe in herself. And with every step she took forward, she knew that she was building something that was far more valuable than anything material. One afternoon, Maya and Jonathan sat together in a cafe, discussing her future plans. She had been thinking a lot about what she wanted to do next. The opportunities were endless, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had choices. "I think I want to study art full-time," Maya said, her voice steady with conviction. "I want to keep learning, keep improving. I want to be someone who can make a difference with my art." Jonathan smiled, his pride evident in his eyes. "I think that's a great plan, Maya. You have the potential to do amazing things. And I'll be here, supporting you every step of the way." Maya smiled back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had come so far, and yet, it felt like this was just the start of a much bigger journey. She had never imagined that her life could change so drastically, that the world she had once felt so distant from could suddenly open up to her. But now, she knew that anything was possible. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Jonathan nodded, his eyes softening. "You've already done the hard part. Now, just keep believing in yourself. The rest will come." As Maya walked out of the cafe that afternoon, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had faced so many challenges, but she had overcome them. She had made it to a place where her dreams were no longer out of reach. And with Jonathan's support and her own determination, she knew that the future was bright. She didn't know exactly where it would take her, but she knew that as long as she kept pushing forward, she would continue to create a life worth living. This was her time, and she was ready to embrace it. The days following Maya's victory at the art exhibition felt like a blur. She had been riding high on her success, but as time passed, something started to weigh on her. The pressure to live up to the expectations, both her own and others, was beginning to mount. She had always been the quiet girl in the back, the one who never dared to dream too big. Now, with each new opportunity, she felt the pull of fear and doubt creeping back in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if this was just a fluke, and she couldn't maintain the success? What if the world expected more from her than she could deliver? Jonathan noticed the change in her. He had seen the shift in her confidence and the way she had blossomed in the past months. But now, there was a new tension in her that he couldn't ignore. One afternoon, after school, he called Maya to meet him at their usual park. When she arrived, he was already waiting, his hands in his pockets as he stared up at the sky. Maya approached slowly, her mind swirling with worries. She had been avoiding him lately, not because she didn't want to see him, but because she wasn't sure how to explain the way she was feeling. Jonathan smiled when he saw her, but Maya could see the concern in his eyes. "Hey Maya, you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, I'm fine," she lied. Jonathan didn't buy it. He stepped closer, his gaze softening. "Maya, you don't have to pretend with me. What's going on?" Maya hesitated, her eyes dropping to the ground. For a moment, she couldn't find the words. But then, the floodgates opened, and she let it all spill out. "I don't know if I can keep up with all of this. All the pressure, the expectations. It feels like I'm walking on a tightrope, and any second, I could fall. I'm scared that I'll fail, that I'll mess it all up." Jonathan listened quietly, giving her the space to speak. When she finished, he placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "Maya, it's okay to feel that way. It's normal to be scared when you're stepping into new territory. But you're not alone in this. You've got people who believe in you, and I'm one of them. But you've got to believe in yourself too." Maya's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, not wanting him to see how much she was struggling. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "What if I'm not good enough?" Jonathan's voice was firm, but kind. "You are good enough, Maya. You've proven that over and over again. The only thing standing in your way right now is your fear. You can't let it control you. You've got to keep moving forward, even when it's hard." Maya sniffled, wiping her eyes. "I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is fine. It feels like the more I try, the more I'm going to disappoint people." Jonathan shook his head. "You're not pretending, Maya. You're learning. You're growing. And sometimes, growth hurts. But that doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're pushing through the discomfort to become the person you're meant to be." Maya looked up at him, her heart pounding. His words hit her like a wave, washing away the doubt and fear, if only for a moment. I don't want to disappoint you, she said, her voice barely audible. Jonathan smiled softly. Maya, I'm not here to see you succeed for my own sake. I'm here because I believe in you. I believe in your art, and I believe in you as a person. And whether you win awards or face setbacks, you'll always have me in your corner. I'm proud of you no matter what. The weight in Maya's chest began to lift. She had been so focused on the fear of failure that she had forgotten to see how far she had come. Jonathan was right. She had proven that she was capable. She had already succeeded, not because of the awards or the recognition, but because she had stepped out of her comfort zone, taken risks, and found a part of herself she had never known existed. Thank you, she whispered, her voice shaking. Jonathan nodded. Anytime. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. You've got a team behind you, Maya. Don't ever forget that. Over the next few days, Maya took Jonathan's words to heart. She stopped focusing on the fear and started to look at the bigger picture. She realized that the pressure she was feeling didn't have to come from expectations, but from her own desire to keep improving. She wasn't perfect, and that was okay. The point was to keep trying, keep learning, and keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. One afternoon, as she sat in the art room working on a new piece, Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't doing this for anyone else. She was doing it for herself. Her art, her journey, it was hers to define. She didn't need to meet anyone else's expectations but her own. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like that was enough. That night, after finishing her painting, Maya stood in front of it, taking in the colors and shapes she had created. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And that was more than enough. She smiled, a sense of accomplishment filling her chest. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she was ready to face it, one step at a time. And with Jonathan's support, she knew that she was never truly alone. As Maya's confidence grew, so did the expectations placed on her. It was both thrilling and terrifying. She had reached a point in her life where opportunities were opening up, but each one carried a weight, an expectation to perform, to succeed. Jonathan had been a constant presence, guiding her through each step, but Maya couldn't help but feel the pressure mounting. She had made so much progress, but now she was starting to fear she might disappoint everyone who believed in her. One day, after school, Maya received a call from Jonathan. He invited her to meet him at a local cafe, where they had spent many afternoons talking about her progress. In the future, as she walked into the cafe, she saw Jonathan sitting at a table by the window, a gentle smile on his face as he saw her approach. Hey, Maya, he said warmly, standing up to greet her. How are you feeling today? Maya sat down, a little hesitantly. The weight of the past few days was pressing down on her, and she wasn't sure how to explain it. I don't know, she admitted, her voice quiet. I feel like I'm failing. Everyone expects so much from me, and I'm scared I won't be able to live up to it. Jonathan studied her carefully, his expression soft but understanding. Maya, he said, his voice steady, you're not failing. You're pushing yourself, you're growing, and that's what matters. No one expects you to be perfect. Not me, not your friends, and certainly not yourself. Maya looked down at the table, her hands clasped tightly together. I just don't know how to deal with all of this, she said, her voice trembling. I want to do well, but the more I try, the more I feel like I'm just pretending to be something I'm not. Like I don't belong. Jonathan reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. You belong, Maya. You've always belonged. The only thing standing in your way is your own fear of not being good enough. But you are enough, just as you are. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Maya looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time since sitting down. She could see the sincerity in his gaze, the unwavering belief he had in her. It was the same belief he had shown from the very beginning, when he helped her take her first steps toward a better future. She wanted to believe him, but the doubt still lingered in her heart. I don't know if I can keep up, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What if I let everyone down? Jonathan squeezed her hand, his voice warm but firm. You won't let anyone down, Maya. Not as long as you keep being true to yourself. People believe in you because of who you are, not because of what you can achieve. You've already done more than most people ever will. You've overcome so much, and you're still standing. That's something to be proud of. Maya sat in silence. For a moment, letting his words sink in. She had always been her own harshest critic, too quick to dismiss her own successes and too eager to focus on her shortcomings. But Jonathan was right. She had come so far, and she wasn't done yet. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to keep moving forward. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. "I don't know why I doubt myself so much. I think I'm just afraid of what's next." Jonathan smiled gently. "Fear is natural, Maya. It's how we grow. But you don't have to face it alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Maya smiled back, the weight on her shoulders lifting just a little. For the first time in a while, she felt a sense of peace. The future was still uncertain, but she no longer felt alone in facing it. With Jonathan's support and her own determination, she could face whatever came next. "I'm ready to try again," Maya said, her voice stronger. "I'm ready to keep going." Jonathan nodded, his smile widening. "That's the spirit. Keep believing in yourself, Maya. You've got everything you need to succeed." Over the next few weeks, Maya focused on embracing her growth, both as an artist and as a person. She still had moments of doubt, but she reminded herself that growth wasn't always smooth. There would be setbacks, there would be challenges, but there would also be triumphs. She couldn't control everything, but she could control how she responded, and she chose to respond with courage. Maya's artwork continued to flourish, and her reputation as an artist began to grow. Her pieces were displayed in more exhibitions, and she received more attention from critics and art lovers. But it wasn't the recognition that made her the most proud. It was the way her art had started to resonate with people. It wasn't just about technique anymore. It was about expression, about telling stories that people could connect with. Maya's work had become her voice, and with each new piece, she found herself speaking louder. As she walked through one of the galleries where her latest piece was being displayed, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The path she had taken was far from easy, but she had carved it out for herself. She had faced her fears, embraced her doubts, and kept moving forward. And now, standing in the midst of her work, she could finally say that she was proud of what she had achieved. Jonathan had always believed in her, and now, she was beginning to believe in herself too. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Maya felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following Maya's latest triumph felt like a whirlwind. She had moved from strength to strength, each day bringing new opportunities, new challenges, and new realizations. But as she continued to grow and succeed, she couldn't ignore the growing tension inside her. The recognition she was receiving was amazing, but it came with a price. Expectations, both external and internal. Maya had learned to trust in herself, but now, the weight of her ambitions and the pressure to live up to them was starting to feel heavy. She found herself lying awake at night, wondering if she could continue to handle it all. What if she couldn't keep up? What if the success she had found was just a fleeting moment, a stroke of luck that wouldn't last? And what if, despite all the progress she had made, the world would always see her as the girl from the streets, as someone who didn't belong in this world of polished galleries and high expectations? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya met Jonathan at the park, her usual place of refuge. He had noticed her growing unease, and he was determined to address it before the doubts consumed her. He was sitting on the same bench where they had talked so many times before, the place where she had first begun to believe in herself. As Maya approached, Jonathan gave her a warm smile, but his eyes were filled with concern. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but probing. "How are you doing?" Maya hesitated. She had grown used to answering this question with a quick, "I'm fine." But this time, she couldn't pretend. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice small. "I'm scared, Jonathan. I've been doing so well, but I feel like I'm not enough. Like I'm just waiting for everything to fall apart." Jonathan studied her carefully, his expression soft but serious. "Maya, you've been through so much already. You've overcome more than most people ever will, and you've done it with grace. I know it's hard, but you need to remember how far you've come. You're not that girl anymore." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. "I don't know if I can keep living up to everyone's expectations," she confessed. "What if I'm just not cut out for this?" Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm and reassuring. "You don't have to live up to anyone else's expectations, Maya. You only need to live up to your own. And you're doing that. You're growing, you're creating, and you're being true to yourself. That's more than enough." Maya swallowed hard, her emotions swirling inside her. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she could handle this pressure, but the fear was still there, gnawing at her. "I've never had to carry this much before," she said quietly. "All this success, all this attention, it's overwhelming. I'm afraid that one day, it'll all crash down on me." Jonathan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I understand. The pressure can be suffocating. But you don't have to carry it all by yourself. You've got me, you've got your friends, and you've got your own strength. You're not alone in this." Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had spent so much of her life alone, fending for herself, that it was hard for her to imagine relying on others. But Jonathan was right. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a support system, people who believed in her. She had made it this far not just because of her own determination, but because she had allowed herself to be helped, to trust others. Slowly, the tension inside her began to loosen. She wasn't sure how to shake off the fear completely, but hearing Jonathan's words made her realize that she didn't have to do everything on her own. It was okay to ask for help. It was okay to lean on the people who cared about her. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. Jonathan smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "You're welcome, Maya. But remember, you don't need to thank me. This is about you believing in yourself. You're the one doing all the hard work." Maya nodded, her heart still racing but with a sense of clarity she hadn't had before. She had been afraid of what might happen if she couldn't keep up, but now, she realized that the only thing that truly mattered was that she kept moving forward, one step at a time. She didn't need to have it all figured out. She just needed to keep being true to herself and to trust that the path would reveal itself as she went. Over the next few days, Maya took small steps to manage the pressure she was feeling. She started meditating before bed, taking time to quiet her mind and focus on the present moment. She made sure to carve out time for herself, away from the expectations and responsibilities that were beginning to feel overwhelming. And when she felt the fear creeping in, she reminded herself of Jonathan's words. She wasn't alone in this. Slowly, the anxiety began to ease. It didn't disappear completely, but she could see it for what it was, a natural response to change and growth. The fear was a part of the process, but it didn't have to control her. She had already faced so many challenges and come out stronger. This would be no different. And as the days turned into weeks, Maya found herself standing taller, her doubts starting to fade into the background. She had learned that success wasn't just about achieving external milestones, but about having the strength to keep going, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. She had come so far, and though the journey was far from over, Maya finally felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. As Maya's life continued to evolve, so did her sense of purpose. The art world was opening up to her, and with it, new challenges and new opportunities. Jonathan remained a steady presence in her life, his belief in her unwavering. Yet, as time passed, Maya realized that the journey she had embarked on wasn't just about proving her worth to others. It was about proving it to herself. One evening, while working on a new piece in the quiet solitude of her studio, Maya received a call from Jonathan. His voice was filled with urgency, but there was a hint of excitement that caught her attention. "Maya," he said, "I need you to listen to me carefully. There's a big opportunity coming your way. You've been invited to participate in a major art show in the city. This could be your chance to really make a mark." Maya sat back, stunned. She had always dreamed of her work being shown in such an important setting, but hearing it from Jonathan made it feel real. "This is incredible," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "But, are you sure I'm ready for something like this?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Jonathan spoke again. "Maya, I've watched you grow. I've seen the way you approach your art, how you've poured yourself into every piece. You've been ready for this for a long time. Don't let your doubts hold you back now." Maya swallowed hard, her heart racing. She had worked so hard to get here, but the fear of failure still loomed. "I don't know if I can handle the pressure," she admitted. "What if my work isn't good enough?" "Maya, it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing your truth. People will connect with your story, with what you have to say through your art. Don't focus on the pressure. Focus on the opportunity to show the world what you're capable of." His words stirred something inside her, a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place. Maya knew Jonathan was right. She had already overcome so much. She could face this next challenge. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'm in." Let's do this. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Maya poured her heart into creating the piece that would represent her at the art show. It wasn't just about the colors or the brushstrokes. It was about telling a story, about sharing the experiences that had shaped her, the struggles she had overcome, and the hope she carried with her every day. As the deadline approached, Maya felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had come so far, but now it was time to put her work out into the world, to allow others to judge it, to see it for what it was. She knew that it was no longer just her work, it was a piece of herself. The night of the art show arrived, and Maya stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been to galleries before, but never like this. This was different. This was a chance to showcase her art to people who had the power to take her career to the next level. She stood behind the curtains, watching as guests mingled, sipping drinks and admiring the other works displayed around the room. Her piece was just around the corner, awaiting its moment to be seen. Jonathan found her just before the show opened, his reassuring smile offering her a sense of calm. "You've got this, Maya," he said. "This is your moment. You've already come so far. Don't forget that." Maya nodded, trying to steady her nerves. "I'm ready," she whispered, even though the truth was, she wasn't sure if she was. As the doors to the gallery opened and the first guests filtered in, Maya felt her pulse quicken. She had put everything into this piece, but now, as the crowd began to admire the work around her, she felt exposed. It was a strange feeling, the mixture of pride and vulnerability. It was one thing to create art in the privacy of her studio, but another entirely to have it displayed for everyone to see, for them to analyze and interpret. She took a deep breath and walked over to her piece, a large canvas filled with vibrant colors, abstract forms, and bold strokes that told a story of struggle and triumph. As people started to gather around her painting, Maya felt a surge of emotion rise within her. This was her truth, laid bare for the world to see. She watched as people stopped, as they took in her work, their eyes scanning the colors, the shapes, the emotion she had poured into every brushstroke. One by one, they stepped closer, admiring the way the piece seemed to come to life. She could hear whispers of approval and surprise, and though she was still nervous, a part of her felt like she could finally exhale. Then, someone approached her. It was a woman dressed in a sleek black dress, her eyes sharp and appraising as she examined the painting. "This is incredible," the woman said, her voice filled with awe. "It's raw, emotional. There's so much depth in this piece. I can see your story in it." Maya's breath caught in her throat. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just for her talent, but for the person she had become, for everything she had been through. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice quiet but sincere. "This piece, it's about my journey, about how far I've come and what I've learned." The woman smiled, her eyes softening. "It's beautiful. You have a real gift. I'd love to see more of your work in the future." Maya smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. For so long, she had doubted herself, unsure if she was truly worthy of success, unsure if she could keep up with the expectations. But in that moment, she knew she was more than capable, and this was just the beginning of her journey. As the night continued, Maya stood by her piece, surrounded by people who saw her work, who appreciated it. For the first time, she truly believed that her dreams were not only possible, they were within reach. The future, full of promise and uncertainty, was waiting for her to take the next step. And this time, she wasn't afraid to take it. As the weeks went by, Maya's world seemed to expand in ways she hadn't anticipated. The art world, once a distant dream, was now her reality. She had received recognition for her work, made connections with influential people, and had even been invited to show her art in a major exhibition in New York City. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, and yet, the pressure was beginning to build. The fear of failure, the fear of not being able to live up to the expectations, both her own and the world's, began to weigh heavily on her shoulders. She had come so far, but the road ahead seemed even more daunting. As much as she had learned to believe in herself, the constant push to do more, to be more, was starting to take its toll. Jonathan noticed the change in her. He had been by her side every step of the way, offering encouragement, advice, and support. But recently, he could see that something was different. Maya had been quieter, more withdrawn, as if she were carrying a burden she wasn't sure how to share. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at school and work, Jonathan called Maya and asked if they could meet at the park. He could sense she needed to talk, and he was determined to be there for her. When Maya arrived, Jonathan was already sitting on the bench they often shared. The park was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights, the sound of the city faint in the background. As she sat down next to him, Jonathan looked at her with a knowing gaze. "Maya," he said gently, "what's going on? I can see that something's been bothering you. Talk to me." Maya hesitated, the words caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him how she felt, wanted to admit that the weight of everything was becoming too much. But at the same time, she didn't want to disappoint him. He had been so proud of her, so supportive. She didn't want to show him any weakness. "I don't know, Jonathan," she finally said, her voice shaky. "It's just all of it. The pressure, the expectations. I feel like I'm going to fail, like I'm not enough. Everyone thinks I'm this great artist, but what if it's just a fluke? What if I can't keep up?" Jonathan didn't say anything right away. He just sat there beside her, letting her words settle. He knew that Maya was harder on herself than anyone else could ever be, but he also knew how much she had already overcome. "Maya," he said after a moment, his voice calm and steady, "you've already proven more than enough. You've shown the world who you are, and you've done it on your own terms. But it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to not have everything figured out. You're still growing, still learning." Maya wiped at her eyes, her emotions threatening to spill over. "But what if I mess up?" she whispered. "What if this whole thing falls apart? I've worked so hard for this, Jonathan. What if it all comes crashing down?" Jonathan gently placed a hand on her shoulder, offering the kind of reassurance that only someone who truly believed in you could provide. "Maya, there's no such thing as perfection. We all make mistakes. We all face setbacks. What matters is that you keep going, that you don't let fear hold you back. You've been through so much already, and you've come out stronger. You've earned every bit of the success you've had." Maya looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't know if I can do it without you," she admitted softly. "You've been my rock through all of this, and I don't know what I would do without you." Jonathan smiled, his expression soft and understanding. "You don't need to do it alone, Maya. I'll always be here for you, but I also know that you have the strength inside you to handle whatever comes your way. You've proven that over and over again." Maya took a deep breath, the weight of his words beginning to sink in. She had always been so afraid of failure, so afraid of not being good enough. But the truth was, she had already achieved more than she ever thought possible. She had created art that spoke to people, she had inspired others, and she had built a life that was full of promise. The fear of failure would always be there, but it didn't have to control her. She could use it as fuel to keep moving forward, to keep growing. "Thank you, Jonathan," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'm going to try. I'm going to keep going, even if it's hard." Jonathan smiled, his pride for her shining through. "I know you will, Maya. And remember, it's okay to stumble along the way. What matters is that you get back up." The next few weeks were a time of reflection and renewal for Maya. She began to focus less on the fear of failure and more on the journey she was on. She realized that her art wasn't about perfection. It was about expression, about sharing her story with the world. She poured her heart into her work, not for validation, but for herself. With each new piece, she discovered more about who she was and what she wanted to say. The art show in New York City came and went, and Maya's work received rave reviews. But for her, the real victory was not the praise she received. It was the peace she felt in knowing that she had done it on her own terms. She wasn't perfect, and that was okay. She was enough, just as she was. And for the first time in her life, she was truly living. She wasn't afraid of what the future held. She was ready to embrace it, to take the next step on the path she had carved for herself. And with Jonathan by her side, she knew she could face anything. The months following the New York Art Show brought new challenges for Maya, but they also marked a period of personal growth. As her work gained recognition, the opportunities seemed endless. Maya was beginning to feel like she was truly living her dream, but it wasn't long before another obstacle appeared on the horizon. Despite her success, the pressures of her newfound life were starting to weigh on her again. The art world was competitive, and with every new exhibition or project, Maya felt a growing sense of responsibility to maintain her success. She was no longer the girl who was just happy to be noticed. Now, she was the artist whose work was expected to impress, to surpass her past achievements. One evening, Maya sat at her desk, staring at her canvas, the blank space before her feeling more intimidating than ever. Her mind was filled with doubts. What if she couldn't live up to the expectations? What if her next piece didn't measure up? She had always pushed herself to do better, to achieve more, but now she wondered if her best was good enough. As she sat there, overwhelmed by the pressure, Jonathan called her. His voice was warm and familiar, and she felt a wave of relief wash over her just hearing it. "Maya," he said, "I can tell something's on your mind. Do you want to talk about it?" She hesitated for a moment, her emotions swirling, but then she sighed and said, "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Jonathan. I'm scared I won't be able to top what I've already done. It feels like the more I achieve, the more I have to lose. I don't know how to keep up." Jonathan's response was calm, as always, but there was a depth to his words. "Maya, I've watched you grow and create amazing things. But the truth is, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You've already done what so many people only dream of. The pressure you're feeling, it's real, but it's also a sign that you're stepping into something bigger. The key is not to let it control you." Maya leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. "But what if I fail? What if I can't do it again?" Jonathan paused for a moment before answering. "Maya, failure is not the end. It's part of the process. You've already shown the world what you're capable of, and it's not just because of your talent. It's because you're willing to keep going, to push through the doubts. That's what sets you apart." His words, though simple, struck Maya deeply. She had always been so focused on avoiding failure, on proving that she could succeed, that she had never allowed herself to embrace the possibility that failure was part of the journey. "I don't know if I've ever really allowed myself to fail," she admitted softly. "I've always been so afraid of it." "And that's okay," Jonathan replied gently. "We all fear failure at some point. But the important thing is to understand that it's not something to be afraid of. It's just a part of growing, of learning. You've already come so far, and that's what matters. If you stumble, you get back up. You've always been able to do that." Maya sat in silence for a few moments, letting his words sink in. She realized that she had been so focused on avoiding mistakes that she had forgotten to appreciate the progress she had made. It wasn't just about success. It was about the journey, about learning and evolving. The idea of failure didn't have to paralyze her. It could be a stepping stone, a way to grow even stronger. "You're right," she said finally, her voice steady. "I've been so focused on trying to make everything perfect that I forgot what's really important. It's about creating, about expressing myself, not about always getting it right." Jonathan's voice softened with pride. "Exactly. And you're doing just that. Your art is about you, Maya. It's about what you feel, what you want to say. Don't let the pressure take that away from you." Over the next few days, Maya took time to reflect on her conversation with Jonathan. She allowed herself to let go of the need for perfection, to embrace the messiness of the creative process. She began working on a new piece, not with the intention of impressing anyone, but with the goal of expressing her feelings, her doubts, her fears, her growth. The process was freeing. She worked with more passion than she had in months, letting the brushstrokes flow without worrying about the final product. When the piece was finished, Maya stepped back and took a deep breath. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was hers. She knew that it wasn't about being the best or impressing others. It was about staying true to herself and her art. That night, as she stood in front of her latest work, she felt a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. For the first time in a while, Maya felt free from the burden of perfection. She wasn't just an artist now. She was someone who had learned to trust herself, to embrace her imperfections, and to keep moving forward no matter what. Jonathan's words echoed in her mind. "It's about you, Maya. It's about what you feel, what you want to say." And with that in her heart, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready for it. The journey was far from over, but Maya was no longer afraid to face it. She had found her true voice, and she was determined to keep creating, keep growing, and keep pushing forward. Her future was no longer defined by the fear of failure, but by the courage to embrace it and keep going. Maya continued to grow both as an artist and as a person. The pressure to succeed, which had once felt suffocating, was now a constant companion, but one she had learned to manage. With Jonathan's guidance and the confidence she had slowly built up, she started to navigate the challenges of the art world with more resilience. Yet, even as she moved forward, the past lingered in the corners of her mind, reminding her of the obstacles she had overcome and the ones still ahead. One afternoon, after another successful exhibition, Maya found herself sitting alone in the studio, reflecting on how far she had come. Her art was being shown in galleries across the city, and she had become somewhat of a local celebrity in the art community. But even with the recognition, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She was happy with her progress, but she had always been someone who struggled to settle for anything less than complete fulfillment. She wasn't just creating art anymore. She was telling a story, her story, and there were parts of it she had yet to express. A few days later, she met Jonathan for coffee, something they had done for years. He was always there when she needed him, offering support and perspective. "How's everything going?" Jonathan asked as they sat down. Maya hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath. "It's going well," she said, but her voice lacked the usual spark. "I've been thinking about my next step, but something doesn't feel right. I think I've been focusing too much on what others want to see in my art instead of what I truly want to say." Jonathan leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Maya, you've been doing great. You've shown the world what you're capable of. But I hear what you're saying. You've reached a point where you're not just creating art to be admired, but to truly express yourself. That's a big shift." Maya nodded, her eyes looking out the window, where the city bustled around them. "I've always been afraid of failure, of not being enough, but now I think I'm afraid of success. I'm afraid that I'll lose myself in what people expect from me. I want to be authentic, but it's hard when everything seems to depend on what others think." Jonathan smiled gently, his voice steady. "Maya, authenticity is what got you here. Don't let the noise drown that out. You don't need to please anyone but yourself. Your journey, your art, it's for you. When you create from that place, that's when you're truly powerful. The rest will follow." His words struck a chord with Maya. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove her worth, trying to gain validation from others. But now, she realized, her art was her own, and the only opinion that truly mattered was her own. The next few weeks became a period of self-reflection for Maya. She spent long hours in the studio, revisiting old pieces and working on new ones. But this time, she wasn't focused on perfection. She was focused on emotion, on storytelling, on capturing a moment of her truth. She allowed herself to experiment with new techniques, to explore different mediums, and to let go of the expectations she had once placed on herself. It was liberating, but also intimidating. For the first time, she was creating not for an audience, but for herself. One evening, after a particularly intense session in the studio, Maya stepped back from the canvas, wiping the sweat from her brow. She looked at the work in front of her, a series of abstract shapes and vivid colors that conveyed a rawness she hadn't allowed herself to express before. She realized that this was the piece she had been waiting to create, the one that would speak her truth, no matter who saw it. It was scary. It was vulnerable, but it was real. A few days later, Maya shared her new work with Jonathan. He looked at the piece, his eyes narrowing as he took it all in. "This is different," he said quietly, "but in the best way possible. It's raw, it's real, it's you." Maya smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It's the first time I've let myself be this honest in my art. It's not about what people want to see. It's about what I need to say." Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze soft. "That's what makes your work special, Maya. You're not afraid to be vulnerable, to show your real self. That's why people connect with you." Maya felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had been holding herself to a standard that didn't belong to her, one based on the expectations of others. But now, she understood that her true power lay in being authentic, in trusting her own voice. As her latest piece was displayed at a gallery opening, Maya felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The crowd that gathered admired her work, but it was no longer about the applause or the recognition. It was about the satisfaction of knowing that she had created something true to herself. She didn't need anyone's approval to feel validated. She had found her own voice, and it was enough. Jonathan, who had been there every step of the way, watched from the corner of the room, a proud smile on his face. He knew that Maya was no longer just the girl who had once doubted her ability to succeed. She was now an artist in every sense of the word, confident in her work and in herself. As Maya looked around the room, surrounded by people who appreciated her art, she realized that this was what she had been searching for all along. Not the recognition, but the freedom to create for herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she had truly found her place in the world. As Maya continued to find her footing in the art world, her life began to take on new dimensions. She was no longer just an aspiring artist trying to prove herself. She was an artist with a voice, with a story, and a purpose. Her work had earned her recognition, but more importantly, it had allowed her to understand herself better. She had become comfortable in her own skin, trusting her instincts, and expressing her truths through every brushstroke. Yet, despite the progress, Maya still faced a challenge that would test her in ways she hadn't anticipated. One day, as she worked in her studio, she received an unexpected invitation to speak at a prestigious art seminar. The event would be attended by art critics, curators, and some of the most well-known figures in the industry. Maya was honored, but the thought of speaking in front of such an audience terrified her. She had always expressed herself through her art, but this was different. This was about speaking directly to people, sharing her journey, and explaining her work in a way she hadn't done before. The fear that had been slowly fading away over the past year came rushing back in full force. What if she wasn't good enough to stand among these accomplished artists? What if her story didn't resonate with anyone? She knew Jonathan would encourage her to take the opportunity, just like he always had. But this felt like a leap she wasn't sure she was ready for. As she sat in her studio, staring at the email invitation, she realized how much had changed in such a short time. Not long ago, she would have never imagined herself standing in front of such a prestigious crowd, let alone sharing her story with them. But now, the thought of turning down the chance made her feel like she was running away from everything she had worked so hard to build. After a sleepless night, Maya decided to accept the invitation. She knew it would be uncomfortable, and she knew there would be moments of doubt, but she also knew that if she didn't take the leap now, she might never feel ready. The day of the seminar arrived, and Maya stood backstage, her nerves bubbling up inside her. The room was filled with important people, people who had shaped the art world in ways she had only ever dreamed of. As she watched the other speakers, she wondered if she truly belonged there. She glanced down at her notes, but the words seemed to blur in front of her eyes. It was too late to back out now. The moment had come. When her name was called, Maya took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The spotlight felt blinding, and the crowd seemed distant and intimidating. But as she began to speak, something shifted inside her. She told them about her journey, the hardships, the struggles, and the people who had helped her along the way. She talked about her art, how it was no longer just a way to survive but a way to communicate, to express everything she had held inside for so long. As she spoke, Maya could feel the tension easing from her shoulders. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply telling her story. And in that moment, Maya realized something important. It wasn't about how others saw her. It was about how she saw herself. She had been afraid of failing, of not measuring up, but the truth was, she had already come so far. The applause that followed felt like a soft exhale after holding her breath for too long. The critics, the curators, and the audience were all there, but in that moment, Maya didn't need their approval to feel accomplished. She had done what she had set out to do. She had shared her truth. After the seminar, Maya felt a sense of relief she hadn't known she needed. The fear was still there, but it was no longer controlling her. She had faced it head-on, and she had emerged stronger because of it. Jonathan was there to congratulate her afterward, his pride shining through as he gave her a warm hug. "I knew you could do it," he said, his voice full of admiration. Maya smiled, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but I'm glad I did it. I needed to prove to myself that I could." Jonathan nodded, his smile never wavering. "You didn't need to prove anything to anyone, but I'm proud of you for doing it anyway." As they walked out of the seminar, Maya felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had learned that it wasn't about the external validation. It was about the courage to stand up for herself and embrace her own journey. The art world had been daunting at first, but now, she felt like she belonged. The fear had not disappeared, but it no longer had a hold on her. She had faced it, and in doing so, had found a new level of strength and confidence. Her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt, but Maya was no longer afraid. She was ready to take on whatever came next. She had already proven to herself that she could rise to the occasion, and she knew that as long as she kept pushing forward, she would continue to grow and evolve as both an artist and a person. Maya continued to move forward, but with each new achievement came a new set of challenges. Her artwork had gained more recognition, and she found herself being invited to bigger galleries, speaking at more events, and being featured in articles. She was proud of what she had accomplished, but the weight of it all began to feel heavy once again. There was a nagging feeling inside her, something that told her she wasn't truly in control of her own life. She had spent so much time trying to prove herself to others that she had lost sight of what truly mattered to her. For the first time, she felt like she was on the verge of something big, but she wasn't sure if it was the right path for her. One afternoon, after a particularly stressful meeting with a curator who wanted her to change her style to be more commercial, Maya found herself walking through the city streets, trying to clear her mind. The world around her felt blurry, her thoughts swirling with doubts and fears. She had always prided herself on staying true to her own voice, but now, the pressure to conform to others' expectations was overwhelming. It was hard to ignore the fact that success in the art world often meant compromising your authenticity. As she walked, she remembered a conversation she had with Jonathan not too long ago. He had told her that her art was her own, and that no one could define her success but herself. But now, standing at this crossroads, she wondered if she could continue to stay true to her values and still succeed. She found herself sitting on a bench in a quiet park, the city noise distant behind her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Jonathan walking toward her, his familiar smile lighting up his face. "Hey," he said, sitting down beside her. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind." Maya sighed deeply, looking down at her hands. "I do," she admitted. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want from all of this, the art, the recognition, everything. And I just feel like I'm losing myself in it. I don't know if I'm doing this for me anymore." Jonathan listened quietly, his gaze thoughtful. "Maya, it's okay to feel this way. You've been pushing yourself hard, and it's natural to question things when you reach a turning point. But the most important thing is to remember why you started this in the first place." Maya looked at him, her heart heavy. "But how do I know what's right? How do I know I'm not just chasing validation?" Jonathan smiled gently. "You know what's right because you've always known. Your art comes from a place of truth, from your heart. If you stay connected to that, you'll never go wrong. The rest is just noise. People will always have their opinions, but you don't need to make decisions based on what others think." Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. For a long time, she had been trying to measure her worth by external standards, by how others perceived her success. But Jonathan was right. Her art had always been her voice, her way of expressing herself to the world. She didn't need to change for anyone. She didn't need to conform to the world's expectations. "I think I understand," she said softly. "But it's hard. The pressure is always there, and it feels like I can't escape it." Jonathan nodded. "The pressure is real, but remember that it's okay to step back, to breathe, and to recalibrate. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to have all the answers today. Just focus on what makes you feel alive, on what excites you. Everything else will fall into place." Maya smiled, her heart feeling a little lighter. Jonathan had a way of making everything seem less daunting, of reminding her of the strength she already carried within. She had come so far. She had faced her fears, embraced her vulnerabilities, and now, she needed to trust that she could continue to do so. "Thank you, Jonathan," she said quietly. "I think I needed to hear that." He smiled back, his eyes full of pride. "I'm always here for you, Maya. No matter what." The next few weeks, Maya focused on finding balance. She took a step back from the pressure of constant exhibitions and commercial projects, giving herself space to create for the sake of creation. She spent hours in her studio, letting her intuition guide her without worrying about the final result. She began to explore new themes in her work, painting from a place of pure emotion, not concern for how it would be received. And with each brushstroke, she felt more connected to herself, more grounded in her purpose. Her art became a reflection of her journey, of the struggle to find her voice, of the courage to trust herself, and of the acceptance that success was not measured by external validation, but by the peace she found within. It wasn't about pleasing others. It was about staying true to what she loved. A few months later, Maya returned to the gallery where she had first exhibited her work. The walls were lined with new pieces, her art now displayed alongside other well-known artists. As she walked through the space, she couldn't help but smile. Her work had evolved, and so had she. She wasn't just the girl who had once doubted herself. She was now the woman who knew her worth, who had learned to let go of the fear and embrace her authentic self. The future was still uncertain, but Maya no longer felt afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that her journey was hers to shape. And with Jonathan by her side, she knew she wasn't walking it alone. Maya stood at the edge of the rooftop, the city lights stretching out before her, a sea of twinkling lights beneath the darkening sky. It had been months since the last big change in her life, but standing here now, in the quiet of the evening, she realized how far she had come. She had learned to trust herself, to trust her art, and to embrace the journey, even when it seemed uncertain. Her journey had been full of twists and turns, with moments of doubt, fear, and unexpected triumphs. But looking back, she couldn't help but feel proud. Proud of the woman she had become and the artist she was still growing into. The weight of the past no longer held her back. She had faced it all, the fear of failure, the pressure to meet others' expectations, the anxiety of not measuring up, and she had come out stronger. Maya wasn't the same girl who had first walked into that cafe, uncertain and unsure of her place in the world. Now, she knew who she was, and that was enough. She turned as she heard footsteps behind her, a familiar figure walking toward her. Jonathan. He had been by her side through it all, offering guidance, support, and a steady hand whenever she needed it. He had seen her grow, just as she had seen him evolve over the months. They had both changed, in different ways, but their bond had only grown stronger. "I was wondering when you'd come up here," Maya said, her voice carrying a light laugh. Jonathan smiled, stepping up beside her. "I figured you could use a bit of quiet time," he said, his gaze following hers to the city below. "How are you feeling?" Maya took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing as she let the cool night air wash over her. "I'm good," she said softly, her voice filled with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, everything I've done, and for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace with it all." Jonathan nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "You've earned that peace, Maya. You've worked harder than anyone I know, and you've come through it all. The best part is that you've done it your way. You stayed true to yourself, and that's something no one can take from you." Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I never thought I could get to this point, but I've realized something," she said, turning to face him. "It's not about the recognition or the success. It's about creating for myself, telling my story, and letting the rest fall into place. It's about finding my own voice and trusting it." Jonathan looked at her, his eyes filled with pride. "And you've done just that," he said softly. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I've learned a lot," she said, her voice steady. "I've learned that failure isn't something to be afraid of. It's just part of the process. I've learned that success isn't defined by what others think of me, but by how true I stay to myself. And most importantly, I've learned that I'm not alone in this. I have people who believe in me, and I can lean on them when I need to." Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "You've come a long way, Maya, and I'm proud of you, every step of the way. But I'm even prouder of the person you've become. You're not just an artist. You're someone who knows her worth, who knows her value." Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time, it wasn't a tear of fear or doubt. It was a tear of release, of knowing that she had found her way. She wasn't afraid anymore. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for always being there." Jonathan smiled, his eyes soft. "You don't need to thank me. You've done all the hard work. I'm just happy I got to witness it." They stood there for a moment, the city buzzing below them, but in that moment, everything felt still. Maya knew that the road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges. There would still be moments of doubt, of fear, and of questioning whether she was on the right path. But now, she knew she could handle it. She had already faced so much, and each time, she had come out stronger. The future was waiting, and for the first time, Maya felt ready for whatever came next. She had found her voice, and it was powerful. She had found herself, and that was the greatest gift of all. Jonathan gave her a gentle nudge, a playful glint in his eyes. So what's next for you, Maya? Another big exhibition? A new project? Maya smiled, her eyes shining with excitement. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to create, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to keep pushing forward. Because this journey is mine, and I'm not afraid of where it will take me. Jonathan nodded, his smile wide. I have no doubt you'll go far, Maya. And as they stood together, looking out over the city that had witnessed her transformation, Maya knew that this was only the beginning. Her journey wasn't defined by her past or by the expectations of others. It was defined by her own strength, her own story, and her own truth. The future was hers to create, and she was ready to embrace it fully, no matter what challenges lay ahead.